So it means a lot for me to get to be here. My name is Mike, and I am from Alaska. And if you are from Alaska or living in Alaska right now, raise your hand. There's about a dozen of us in different ways here. Keep your hands up. If you know somebody that is in Alaska or has been in Alaska, raise your hand. Okay, so there's a lot of us. So we're basically best friends, is what I'm seeing from this. We're very connected. This is my first time actually being here at Apple Cider Press, and I'm really thrilled to be here. It's really awesome. Last year, I was here for only a couple of hours with some of the AIM students that I had with me as we bought a car in Texas and we drove it up to Alaska, and we were just passing through, and they said, you should go to Apple Cider Press and just hang out there for a couple of hours and see people. And it was so awesome getting to be here to see all the different connections that we had. And from those connections, they invited us to come back here this year. So I'm pretty hyped to be here for the whole thing. I have no idea really what this weekend's going to look like. I guess we're making stuff, making cider. And so I'm excited to do that, but most excited to spend time with you and for us to draw closer to God and to have this time together to dig into his word and for us to look to him to be unbreakable in a very breakable world. What I want to start with y'all is, one, I want to address the constant apologizing that I have been receiving as being, and what's the longest I've ever really stayed in Washington intentionally, of just being in Washington. And everyone's like, I'm so sorry it's so smoky. I'm so sorry that it's not normally like this. It's about to snow in Alaska. I'm just happy it's warm. And I don't know if this is like appropriate, so please forgive me. I'm sure the fires are like causing a lot of damage, but like fire's warm, that's nice. Like the smoke is okay. Like I'm just go outside. I laid on the grass today outside, and I was feeling I get a sunburn just from the lights getting turned on because it's just it's dark sometimes in Alaska. So I'm super happy to be here. Just the warmth is really important, but the warmth of being able to be connected is what's really special. Looking at the theme of being unbreakable and resilient, I want to tell you about someone I really look up to, as a man named Lauren Hollingsworth. He is like the most apex tough guy I have ever met. He's been a missionary in Thailand for almost 50 years. He now lives half of his year in Alaska and half in Thailand. He was in the special forces during the Vietnam War. I went bear hunting with him, and I was like, as we're walking outside in the woods, I was like, I cannot say, hey, we should take a break, because like this guy is 80 years old and still going, and like if I can keep up with him, I just don't deserve to be outside ever. But this guy is so tough and so strong, and he is the most spiritually strong person alive that I've met. And getting to converse with him and talk with him, I got to go to Thailand with him for a little while. I asked him one time, Lauren, if there's something you could have done differently over these years working with the church, if there's something you could have done different, what would it be? And he said, I wish I spent more time investing in youth. I wish I spent more time investing in the young people. And so being here with you guys, getting to be a preacher myself, getting to travel, to connect with you, and for us to look at God's word together, I see as such a valuable time, because getting to prepare you for the struggles that you're already facing, and you're going to be facing more so in the very near future, preparing you with God's word to face those things now is so important and so valuable. So I'm just really hyped to get to be here with y'all. So our first slide here, Brent, if you'd like to switch the slide for us, I want us to show you a picture of someone that you've probably have maybe heard of. This is a picture of Jesus taken 2,000 years ago. And when you look at this picture, I don't know what you see. I don't know what feelings come to mind. But when I look at this, there's a lot of questions that come up. And that is, what do you see? Do you see, when you think of Jesus, do you think of an idea? Do you think of something you were taught as a kid? Do you think of perhaps a tradition? Or do you see the Son of God? Do you see the divine? Do you see the perfect King, your friend, the strongest, the most ultimate resilient person to ever be? because there's a lot of ideas about Jesus, but there's a lot of bogus ones about Jesus too. The world has a lot of suggestions about who Jesus is. And if there's anything this weekend that I hope we can get clear is, who is Jesus really? Who is he to me? And to have a correct connection to Christ, because there's a lot of tough people in the world. It's not only Christians that have a lot of endurance in times, that have a lot of resilience in times, but there's something that really sets Christians apart, that makes us holy, and it's Jesus. Jesus is the missing ingredient in humanity that sets us apart to have real, unshakable qualities. And this day and age, and especially in the United States, Christianity isn't this like foreign idea. There's a lot of misconceptions about Christianity, but it's not like someone's like, wait, what is Christian? I've never heard of a Christian before. So let's go to the next slide to talk about this question of what is a Christian? What does it mean? Who are we? What are we? Do we claim to be Christians? What are we communicating when we say this? Does it just mean that you're a good person? Does it mean that you believe that there is a God and he exists? Are you part of a tradition that you were like born into, that your family goes and you get dragged along to go to it? What does it mean to claim to be a Christian? And in talking about being resilient, being unbreakable, where does that come from? What are we trying to be resilient for? Let's go to the next slide, because I wanted to see how Jesus describes what it means to be connected to him and with him. He uses this word disciple here in Matthew 28:19 through 20, where this is where Jesus has resurrected from the dead. He's about to ascend to heaven, and he tells his disciples this great commission to go out into the world. And this is what he says. He says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything that I have commanded you." Now, disciple is not a word we really use today. It really literally means student, but we don't use the word disciple of like if you're going to college or if you're taking a class, like, oh, I'm a disciple of English, I'm a disciple of this. It's not a word we use. The word disciple is to embrace and spread the teachings of another. And if we're looking to be what Jesus wants us to be, he's looking for people to be disciples, of people that embrace his teachings and spread them to others. So the rest of this lesson, I want us to talk about being a disciple, because if we're real disciples of Jesus, that's what's going to make us resilient when we are what he has designed us to be, and not us trying to be something else. So for the next slide, let's go. We're going to look at Luke 14, verses 25 through 33. Jesus is speaking here in the yellow words here, verse 26. "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." So I want us to unpackage this and understanding, what is Jesus talking about with hating these people? These people in this list, these are the most instinctually close people. Your parents, your siblings, even yourself. He's saying, if you don't hate them, you cannot be my disciple. Now, Jesus is, when we saying hatred here, I want us to think, well, what does that mean? Because he says elsewhere, love your neighbor. And now he's saying, hate these people. What is he talking about here? What Jesus is saying, that if it comes down to it and you have to choose between these closest people in your life or being his disciple, you have to choose being a disciple of Jesus even over people in your family. If it comes down to having to pick between the two, or if your family says, we're not going to follow Jesus, we're going this way, and you're saying, well, I need to follow Jesus, and you choose to follow Jesus when your family and loved ones are going a different direction, the family is going to perceive that choice as hatred. Like, you're abandoning us is how they're going to see that. And it's not that we wish them harm. It's not that we're trying to cause them pain. It's that we're going now in different directions. We're leaving them because we're following Jesus. So if you're trying to hang on to these relationships, and if you're trying to hang on to Jesus and they're going in different directions, there comes to a point where you got to let go of one of them. And Jesus says, if you're going to follow me, you have to hang on to me all the time, no matter what. And that has to be a decision in your mind. I have a family and I love them dearly. I love my parents. I love my siblings. But if I have to choose between Christ and them, I have to choose Christ. And I hope that they come with me in that pursuit of Christ. But that decision, that mental condition that I have of I'm choosing to follow Jesus above anyone else. And if someone wants me to follow them over Jesus, it's going to seem like hatred to them when I say, no, I can't do that. I'm going to follow Jesus. And I hope you caught what Jesus said here at the end of this verse, that if this isn't there, he doesn't just say, you're going to have a hard time being my disciple. He doesn't just say it's not going to work the best. He says, you cannot be my disciple. And if we're looking to be resilient, if we're looking to be unbreakable, unshakable, if we have a compromising connection to Jesus, where we want to be connected to Jesus sometime, then it's not going to work. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to see something else that Jesus says about being his disciple. The next verse here in Luke 14, he says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Jesus is saying this at this point before he was crucified on the cross. And so a cross in this way, a cross was like the electric chair of the ancient times. It was an instrument of death. And so if you were carrying your cross, if you walked out in the street and you saw somebody carrying their cross down the road, they're not going to the grocery store. They're not going to go for the weekend trip somewhere to make apple cider. They are going on their way to die. They're going to be toast pretty soon. And they're basically a dead man walking. And Jesus saying, take up your cross and follow me. It's to accept my life is done. I'm still breathing, but my life here on earth is already over. I've given up claim to whatever else might have happened. And this is now a one-way trip. And a cross, you can't hide it. If I was carrying a cross that I was going to get hung on and I'm carrying it behind me, it's going to be an obvious addition to what you're looking at. It's not something I can just tuck underneath my shirt or a tattoo I can cover up. That having this cross a part of you, like, no, my life is already done. I'm going this path and I can't just set this down and go do something for a little while. This is now what I am, where I'm still here on earth, but I'm on this journey of this life concluding in a certain way. And in addition to carrying your cross, he also says to come after me. It's not just take this cross and go wherever you want. You're following someone who has taken their cross and you're going with him. Who here has ever done any track, like in sport and just running? I like sports a lot. I like playing basketball and soccer. I did wrestling in high school, but track was such a pain for me because I just realized I love to run and chase a ball. I'm like a dog where I see something, I just want to go after it. If I'm going to be competitive against someone, but if I'm just running for the sake of running, I just don't have the mental fortitude to really do that. But when I was with my friend Ray in high school, he was an excellent runner. And the fastest I ever ran for my mile was when he ran with me, and he was egging me on, even running backwards. Like, come on, keep up with me, Mike. And just running with him helped me run way faster than ever because I had someone to follow, someone to focus on, someone to go with me. Jesus has shown us what this life can look like. And like we read back in Matthew, he's with us always. And so with this taking up a cross of recognizing my life is done, it's no longer I who live, it's Christ who lives in me. I also have a following of him that needs to be taking place. And it seems like a lot of us tend to get stuck in one of those where they say, okay, my life's over. I'm going to step away from this. I'm going to cut my hand off here in this way. I'm going to get this out of my life. But then, or they just think like, oh, Jesus is awesome. Jesus is so good. And yeah, I want to follow him, but I also don't want to get rid of these things in my life. And both of those need to be happening at the same time, where I accept this life is over. And in giving up this life, I'm also receiving this new kind of life from Jesus in following him. And those things need to be happening at the same time. And just like Jesus says, if this is not here, he says, you cannot be my disciple. And again, emphasizing this isn't just going to help you be his disciple, is that you cannot be his disciple if this attitude is not in our hearts and in our minds. I really like this picture here on the left where this guy is crawling through this opening of the cross, because Christ has shown us a way of living and a kind of life that no one has ever done before. No one's been sinless. No one's been the very nature of God on earth. That's never happened before. It does. And do you think, looking at this, could that guy fit through that? Could you think he could crawl through that? Yeah, I think he can. Jesus has never commands us to do something we can't do, and saying, come follow me, be like me. We're able to do that. And obviously we can only do it through his help, through his example, through his spirit. And we get pretty clunky and messed up sometimes. And just like Haas showed us, we need to fail forward, but we can follow him and go the path he showed us. But could you fit through that cross without making any different motions than you normally would? Could you just walk straight through that hole? It's going to take some awkward moments of having to contort yourself a little bit and step through there. And you're in following Jesus and obeying him, you're not going to be able to do it just by accident. You're not going to be like, wow, here I am living just like Jesus. I didn't even think about it. Where it requires this choice. I'm going to let go of this world. I'm going to hang on to everything that Jesus gives me. And something you can do because he's commanded it to happen. He's invited us into it with something we can receive, but it's not going to happen by accident. Let's go to the next slide. We'll see another descriptor Jesus says about discipleship. Now in verse 28. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man had began to build and was not able to finish. So now Jesus is introducing an idea of construction and progress that's taking place in our following of him. I'm building a house right now for our family, and other family members and people in the church have been helping me these last 2.5 years. And something that Alaskans tend to be known for is living in unfinished houses. I don't know if it's like that in Washington or not, but like living in an unfinished house where trim's not done or the siding's not on yet, or there's just things that just it's livable, but it's certainly not a finished house. And also in Alaska, maybe it's just because of the way the economy has happened and just the housing market has been booming. There's a lot of unfinished houses, at least in Alaska, where people started building things, but then now things have tapered off. And there's just a lot of stuff that's just been sitting or delayed. And I love this part that Jesus talks in about this idea of this construction, because he makes a point here that when it's the unfinished house gets this mockery from the world of saying, look, this guy was trying to build this thing, but look, they were not able to finish. But do you know who never gets mocked? Construction workers, or who are in the middle of building something. You don't walk over to a bunch of construction workers like, look at these guys building something, bunch of losers. No one mocks things that are in the process. The mockery happens because of the abandoning of the journey of this development. But it's when things are given up, when things are halted because we're like, oh, we didn't really actually think this through. We didn't think about how long this was going to take or how much it was going to cost for this to happen. I'm thankful that no one's driven by my house and just mocked me for building my house. It would be silly. And we're hoping to move in at the end of this month, which is going to be a huge relief. But in thinking of this idea of construction, something C.S. Lewis said, who's a really, I think, a profound theologian about 60 years ago, he said, everybody is like a living house, and everyone's a house. And in this house, there's a gaping hole in the roof. And that hole in the roof is a very obvious sin or addiction or problem. And whether it's pornography or substance abuse or something that like we can look at and we can say, okay, this probably shouldn't be here. And in this hole in the roof, we call for help, and we call for the master builder, the great physician. We call it to Jesus, and in calling out to him, he knocks on our door and he shows up and he's here to heal and here to save. That's his thing. And so he comes into our house, he gets into our life, and he starts working on this hole that's in the roof. And then we thank him for that. And he's helping heal us and giving us discipline and giving us direction and structure. But then after he heals and fixes this hole in the roof, he then starts ripping up some of the flooring. We're like, what are you doing? And then he starts knocking holes out in the wall. You're like, I like those walls. And then he starts adding on whole other rooms. And you're like, what are you doing, Jesus? I just wanted you to fix this one part of my life. And Jesus' response is, I did need to fix that, but I need you to look like me. And until you look just like me, I'm not done with you yet. And Jesus continues to build us and refine us and discipline us and prune us and mold us into becoming more and more like him. And that's this building project, this process of recognizing Jesus doesn't want to just help you in just this one part of your life. He's trying to give you new life, abundant life. He's trying to give you his life forever, being with him forever, because he's the one that makes you resilient. He's the one that makes you good. He's the one we're following. It's not, Christianity is not about trying to get Christ into your life. It's letting Christ bring you into his life. And it's not about trying to live a life that he's approving of. And it's like almost like a social media of we sometimes want Jesus to follow us instead of us looking to follow Jesus and leaving everything behind to follow him into the life he calls us into. Instead of living something like, oh, I hope Jesus would like me doing this. We need to have a life that's letting him build us and never give up that process. And if we're still alive, he's still working on us, making us into his image. There's a lot of half-built towers in the world, especially in the United States. There's a lot of people claiming to be Christians that don't want to let Christ build them and mold them and grow them. And you get to choose, just like Haas was telling us today. We can choose to receive what God has given us, to follow him, or we can choose to hang on to things we should not be hanging on to. And there's a lot of people claiming to be following Jesus, but not letting him build them into who he wants them to be. So let's go to the next slide now. We're going to see another metaphor that Jesus teaches about being his disciple. In verse 31, he says, what king going out to encounter another king in war will not first sit down and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends out a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So I really enjoy this part that Jesus talks about for being his disciple, because he says that you are a king or a queen. You are a royalty, and you have your own little nation of 10,000 soldiers. And yet there's another king with 20,000. And if you two are going to be in conflict, the 20,000 is definitely going to win. There's no way that you're going to be able to win this victory. So because you know you cannot stand up against him, you send out a delegation for peace to make sure that you're not going to have to go to this war. You know you're not going to win. Now, in that situation, which of those two kings get to decide what peace is going to look like? It's going to be the king with the 20,000. And he's going to say, I want your crown and I want your people. And the surrendering of that is a much better quality of life than you shaking your fist and trying to hang on to what you have. But you get to choose. You can either bow to this king now or bow to him later, because Jesus is going to return and everyone's going to bow before him, whether they want to or not. And this is the choice we get to make every day. Are we going to bow to him and join him in his kingdom? Or are we going to try to hang on to our lives and the way we want things to be and shake our fist up against him? And we can bow before him now, or we can bow before him later. And taking off our crowns and laying them before Christ and recognize, I don't want to be king of my life. I want to be part of your kingdom. That being just the lowest servant in his kingdom is way more royal and prestigious and noble than being the king of your own little life. It's like being a king of a rock, or being able to live with the king of kings forever and being his friend and being in his presence. Much different quality of life, way better off. And now our last thing from this passage I want us to look at. Let's go to the next slide, verse 25. Or sorry, not verse 25, verse 33. Jesus wraps this up by saying, "Therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." I got to do mission work in South Africa for a few years, and they have a way of capturing baboons and other monkeys. And the way that they do it is monkeys are, especially baboons, are inherently quite selfish, greedy creatures. And the way they capture them, they have these like softball sized like plastic spheres and they have holes in them, and inside them they have different nuts and fruits and little things, and then there's a bigger hole on the side of it. And the way this captures a baboon is they mount it on the side of a fence or a tree, and they put these different little yummy things in there of nuts and stuff, and a baboon will smell it and see it and then come over to it and put their hands inside there and then grab hold of these nuts and fruits and things inside. And they want those things inside so badly, they won't ever open up their fist. And because they made a fist inside, they can't pull their hand out. And once they grab hold of these things, you can walk right up to it and they'll start freaking out because they'll see you come closer. But they want these things so badly, they won't ever let go. And you can walk over to them and just take them out, bonk them over the head, or whatever other way you want to take it from you. And all they would have to do is just let go and they would be free. But because they're hanging on to just these little things, they end up losing their life. Jesus talks about whoever loses their life for his sake will find it. Whoever's trying to find their life will lose it. And this life that is being offered to you cannot compare to the eternal life and right standing with God forever that Jesus has provided for you. So we get to choose. Do we want to try to hang on to these little things that this life provides, or do we want to let go and have actual life with Christ forever? I look at statistics for youth in the churches throughout the country, and for the last several decades, only about 30% of teenagers in the United States continue in being a part of a church and continuing and following Christ. And that is a brutally hard statistic to read about and to see played out over these years. Only 30%. That's like right here of y'all will continue to be going to church if statistics continue to be true. Y'all don't have to be part of that statistic. You could be the exception to that and perhaps the beginning of something new happening in this culture where people start choosing to let go of what this world has, because you don't have to be an adult to make that choice. You can make that choice right now for the rest of your life I don't want to hang on to these things this world has. I want to hang on to things Jesus is giving. And what he's giving you is a new way, a new direction, new life, a new day to receive his mercies and to follow him forever. Jesus talks about there's this narrow way that leads to life, and those who take it are many. And there's this broad path that leads to destruction, and it's easy, and those who take it are many. So the few, you can be part of the few. It's a choice we all get to make. And I'm praying this weekend and for the rest of your life that you choose to follow Christ on this narrow way, even though it is difficult and requires resilience. And the only way to have that resilience is to be the disciple that Jesus has called each of us to be. Not something that we think we need to be, something he has called us to be, because he knows what he's talking about. We need to trust him. For the last bit of this lesson, I want to introduce you to some really special people to me. Like I mentioned, I'm a minister in Alaska and a missionary up there, and I'm part of something what's called the Adventures in Missions program, where this program based out of Texas and something I went through as well. That is how I ended up in South Africa for a few years. Have you ever heard of AIM? Raise your hand if you've heard of AIM. Okay, about 2/3 of y'all have. Good. So we have AIM students that work with us in Alaska, where it's college-age young adults work with a missionary somewhere around the world for about 2 years. And so we have 6 AIM students working with us. And as I'm explaining, y'all 6 go ahead and come on up here and sit here. I'm going to ask them some questions. I want you to hear from them their experiences so far in being a disciple of Jesus and taking this narrow way that Jesus invites us all to take. And none of us have this all figured out, but they're people walking by faith. And 2 of them specifically are from Apple Cider Press, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit here in a moment. But I'm going to ask them a series of questions. I hope you hear from them the relatability of we're all in this walk together, something that your African brothers and sisters in the church shared with me is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I want to let these young people speak in responding to these questions. And I hope it equips you to see this isn't just some head knowledge that preachers buy into of following Jesus, but it's something each one of you is invited into an abundant life that only Christ provides. So why don't y'all go through and just say your name, where you're from, and then I'll ask y'all some questions.
Hi, I'm Tucker, and I'm from Lubbock, Texas.
I'm Kyle, and I am from Texas.
I'm Emily, and I'm from Mexico.
I'm Jade, and I'm from west of here.
I'm Grace, and I'm from Washington.
I'm Natalie, and I'm from Alabama.
Good job. So the microphones are not working for us here, but they are being recorded for live streaming and recording. So be sure to project. So first question is, have you ever been embarrassed to do the right thing?
I would say I definitely have. I used to work at Walmart a while ago, and it was just not a good work environment for me, and it was very hard to be a Christian there when I worked there at my age, because everybody there was very much looking down on me the whole time. But it was very embarrassing to have to sometimes be like, I have to leave this conversation, or can you please not say that? But I knew it was the right thing to do, so it was good. But yes.
Yeah. Peer pressure is a real thing. Having people around you that you care about what they think and what they're doing, and sometimes it's hard to be honest and real about disagreeing with that. That's something I struggle with, like people pleasing. I want people around me to be happy, and so sometimes being able to be honest with them about whatever they're doing, if it wasn't right, yeah, that's really hard.
I think still to this day, I get embarrassed of what are people of the world going to think of me and what my values are. And I don't know, I'd say, yeah, I still get embarrassed about what are people going to think of me if I choose to do the right things and to follow the values that I know are right and that Jesus wants me to.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a preacher's kid, so going to I did extracurricular activities, and they knew who I was, and they knew my past, and they knew that I was a Christian, and sometimes it's hard to just ignore like the comments like, ooh, well, she's not going to do that because she's Christian. And no, I'm not going to do those things because I'm Christian. And to stay firm and stand up for what you believe in can be hard when there's peer pressure.
Be sure to be projecting real loud.
One of the earliest memories I have was when I was 7. I would go walk through the store with my mother, and I remember this one time when I got my hands and knees at the store, and I was looking underneath the shelving, and I found this piece of candy, and I was like, "Oh, no one wants this. I mean, it's on the ground. No one can see it. No one's gonna buy it." And so I just put it in my pocket, and I walk out with my mother. And later, I go to open it up and just eat it, and she's like, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, "I got it from the store." And she's like, "That's stealing. You shouldn't be stealing like that. You need to go back to the cashier and say sorry and give it back to her." And so I go back in, and I'm like super embarrassed. I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, Mom, please don't make me do this. And I go to hand it to her. I'm so sorry I stole this. And she's like, it's okay. You can have it. It's fine. And even at a young age, I was very embarrassed to do the right thing. So
Yeah. Whenever I was around y'all's age, like middle school, high school, or most of high school, I struggled a lot with wanting to be able to relate with pretty much every group that I was in. So I would change myself based on like who I was hanging out with, and like in some cases that was definitely pretty bad. So later on, I kind of realized that as Christians, we're supposed to stand out and we're supposed to be that difference. And being in those situations where you do stand out is actually giving you an ability to minister to people and bring them to Christ. So, yeah.
Nice. Have you ever lost a friend or a relationship because of Jesus?
Yeah, I definitely would say that I have. I think definitely whenever I was leaving for AIM and kind of like explaining to a lot of people like what I was doing, a lot of my friends from high school like didn't understand why I would be like devoting this much time and all this effort to serving Christ and doing something different than what most people do. And it was just hard to kind of leave those people behind, but it definitely paid off. So.
Hold the mic a little closer when you talk.
I would say very recently, I kind of lost a friend. We still talk now and again, but we don't have the same relationship. And that's mainly because I don't want that. We've been friends for a very long time, but because I made the decision to pursue my faith and make that a top priority and join the AIM program, I left my home here. And she was very much my worldly friend and held me back and was a big influence on a lot of things I did that I'm not very proud of. And because I chose to pursue my faith and make God first, I lost that relationship I had with her. We still talk every once in a while, but it's not the same. And I always, in the conversation, just very sad that I couldn't have taken her with me on this journey because that was something she wasn't willing to give up.
Yeah, I would definitely say I have, just thinking about being here. I grew up coming to this place every year, and I have several friends that were sitting in the same chairs as you, and they don't follow the Lord anymore, and they decided to pursue things that are the world offers in a variety of different ways. And so it's really it's a real thing that not everyone is going to be able to stay on this path because they choose things that they think can fill them in different ways. Even a close friend of mine, the more we get older and we continue to pursue things in the future, and we're just going different directions, and it has me going one way and her another. So we are growing apart in that way, and it's hard.
Yeah, I when I decided to leave and join the AIM program and do mission work full time for a couple years, I lost even some friends who claimed to be Christian. Some of my friends were just thought I was so insane for not going straight to college, and thought that it was just crazy, and thought that I was trying to be holier than thou, and just would not be my friend anymore because they thought that I should be pursuing things like an education first. And just even friends that claim to be Christian, sometimes you might lose them because they might choose the world over Christ.
Second to last question. What inspires you to do the right thing?
So my favorite Bible verse right now is Philippians 3:12, And Philippians 3, in the beginning, is talking about living for Christ and striving for the goal. And Philippians 3:12 talks about how Christ has made us his own, and so we should strive to make him our own and to make his resurrection and his salvation our own. And for me, that's like my biggest inspiration is that Christ personally made me his own and personally died for me and personally loves me and wants me with him. So
Yeah, just the reward that we have after this. You know, you can think of the I remember like when you were a kid and your mom wanted you to behave, she'd maybe bribe you sometimes, and how you'd be so content for that, and not just being content for doing the right thing, because you're getting a reward, because you're giving your life to God, and you're giving your life to somebody who truly cares, and nobody ever is gonna love you the way he has. And just being able to keep that in mind is really helpful when things get difficult.
When I first got my physical Bible, my first one, I immediately grabbed a highlighter and highlighted my favorite verse in the Bible, and that's from Psalm 119, 105 through 106. And it says, "Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. I have sworn an oath and kept it to abide your righteous rules." And ever since then, I've always abided with that, like following God's statutes. And we are so blessed and super unworthy to be serving this God, and yet he allows us in. And that's just an inspiration that I've been living up to since reading that verse.
Last question. What do you do daily that helps you in following Jesus and being his disciple?
I think something for me is definitely just recognizing creation, and just even if it's like the small things, like how the brain works, or like how pretty the trees are, or just like what's around me. Romans 1:20 says that creation shows us a little bit more of who God is, and that just really helps me to stay close to him.
Something I can think about is music is really accessible and to everybody, and I really like to worship and to fill my head with just finding new songs that glorify God, and to sing and to acknowledge all the greatness he's done for me. And that's something that helps me. I talk with God pretty much all day, every day, and that's something that helps me. It's an ongoing conversation. It's not something I end, and it's not something I really start. It's just something that's just always there. And I'll be sitting, by myself or in a big group, and I'll just, I don't know, trail off, and sometimes I'll space off, and I'll just be talking with God. Or I don't know, I've started doing this thing where it's like if I see something, throughout my day that really, I don't know, that I can really see Christ in, I count it, and I'll be like, okay, so like I'll tally all of those things from the day, and sometimes they're really high and sometimes it's really low, and that just helps me to keep going and make sure that I'm not a reason that if somebody else plays this, little game, that their number isn't low.
Something for me is counting all things joy and realizing that Christ has put us in a position that we can be close to him and we're able to have a relationship with him. Just being reminded of that and staying in awe and reverence to him. And something that's practical that I try to do every day is just praying and talking with him out loud, making him very present and very real. That's just something for me that is really helpful.
So last year we had a camp and one of the speakers challenged us and also just gave us advice that what he does every day is he reads 4 chapters of the Bible every single day. And he said what he used to do was he used to think like, I'm not in the mindset to read, like I'm not going to get anything from it. But he realized that reading 4 chapters a day was changing him because it's the words that's changing him, not his mindset. And so that's something I've tried to implement in my life, especially lately, just reading consistently 4 chapters a day of the Bible. I try to do a Bible study as well, but just always reading 4 chapters a day and also starting my day off with naming just 10 big things God has blessed me with. And 10 things that I'm grateful for, because there's always something new every day to be grateful for.
Awesome. So what I hope you see from listening to this is we're not people that have it all together, not at all, but we recognize Jesus is our master. He's our savior. We want to follow him. We want to follow him together and have unity in that. And as we wrap up tonight and we're connecting with each other, we want us to be thinking, what is it meaning to be a Christian? Why should we be resilient? Why should we look to be unbreakable? And the only way we can do that is by hanging on to Christ and being connected to him. Something Jesus said at the end of his long sermon he gave in Matthew 5-7. He says, the one who hears my words and does them is like a wise man who builds his house on a rock. And then when the storm comes, the house stands firm. But whoever hears my words and does not do them, it's like a foolish man who builds his house upon the sand. And whether you're wise or foolish, you still have to experience the storm. Wisdom does not get you out of the storm, but following Christ gives you the ability to endure the storm. And these young people, I know many of you here as well, are wanting to hang on to Jesus and be built on that rock. And that's what it means to be a Christian. That's that we're so awesome, have it all together, but we know who is awesome and has it all together. And that's who we're wanting to be connected to and built upon. And it's not this big, complicated theological rocket science. It's he is strong, he is good, he is available and with us. Let's be with him. And in doing so, there's things that we need to change and follow him. And just like that contorting cross picture, we have to go where he has gone and follow him. And these young people are doing it. We don't do it perfectly, but we're pursuing it. I know many of you are as well. And let's do that together. And let's continue to do that this weekend. We love you all. And please, I don't know what our schedule looks like exactly, but I hope we get a lot of time to sit down together and just encourage each other, get to know each other, and draw closer to the Lord together.